technology panel. So we've already heard from Robin this morning, so I'll be inviting Robin Johnson back onto the stage to join me for our technology panel. We also have Ian Robson, who is from Verint, and he is the account director from Verint. We also have Margaret Moore, who's joining us. Now, Margaret Mags is from Soprasteria and is the Director of Scotland and Northern Ireland for Government. And we have Simon, who some of you may have heard yesterday from the Market Solution Specialist from Netcall. So just wait for Simon to join us. What I'm going to do is just ask you all to do a quick introduction. Obviously, I've said sort of who you are and who you work for, but if you just tell us a wee bit around about your role, and then we'll move on to the questions that we've got prepared regarding our technology panel. Mags, I've just had hand across to you and just ask you to introduce yourself.
Okay, hi everyone, good morning. I'm Mags Moore. I've worked for Soprasteria for the last 10 years here in Scotland. I'm the director for our public sector business here, and very recently, in fact, I'm taking up a role to look at local government from a UK perspective, all about joining the dots to make public services better in the citizen journeys. That's the thing that we've got a real passion for. Thank you.
Yesterday from Broxburn, I believe that some of your colleagues were involved with, and they talked a lot around that citizen journey and how they've really managed to improve things. And one of the things that was quite impressive about their presentation was the pace of change. I think it can be something that a lot of people get frustrated with the local government is the pace of change, although maybe know something that we've seen in the last 8 months or so. Ian, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning everybody. My name is Ian Robson and I'm a gamer turned poach keeper, by which I mean I sat on both sides of the fence. I worked at several local authorities in the early part of my career. I worked at Brighton and I worked at London Borough of Haringey, London Borough of Croydon, and I then transferred across to the private sector, and I've been involved in selling and providing solutions to local authorities for a couple of decades now, more years than I care to remember. But I think importantly, I have sat on both sides of the fence in terms of this discussion as a procuring side, and also in terms of selling solutions to authorities. In particular, I've been involved in digital solutions and CRM solutions really since they were invented at the turn of the millennium. So I've been on both sides.
Great, thanks Ian. Simon?
Good morning everyone. My name's Simon Pike. I'm a market solution specialist for local government at Netcall. I have responsibility for our low-code technology predominantly within the local government marketplace, and talking to our customers and other local authorities and trying to work out kind of the solutions that we can help deliver using our technology, whether that be the low-code, our RPA or our contact centres.
Robin, I know that we've heard from you already this morning, but I just wondered if you wanted to say anything more around your role around your role at Vodafone.
Yeah, real quick. So I am a solution specialist dealing with digital transformation, but focusing on the end user.
Great, thanks very much. So the reason that I thought this panel would be an interesting discussion today is I work with a number of different organisations, and quite often I see people pinning all their hopes against one or more technology projects, that if only we had a new CRM, or if only we implemented this new bit of tech, it would actually solve all our problems. It was quite interesting actually. I was doing a workshop last week with a number of users, and I was getting them to tell me about what works well and what are your challenges. But it was meant to be about their current technology, but when they talked about their challenges, nearly all their challenges people and process. And I actually thought it'd be quite interesting just to have a discussion with a number of suppliers around what your view is around why sometimes technology projects don't deliver the benefits, and people tend to be disappointed with some of the output. So probably I want to start, maybe I'll come to yourself first, Ian, and just ask you to comment on what would you think is a common mistake that you see organisations make in relation to technology projects?
Well, I think the first point I'd like to make, Esther, is that I think the nature of the technology that's being sold is different now. If I hark back, we used to essentially sell data entry systems. And when an authority bought something, there was a big tick list of does your system do this? And we all said yes. And what typically happened was that the one that was the lowest or the near lowest price then actually was implemented, and it was put in, and it was then up and running. And the authority themselves would put data in, and out would come a housing benefit assessment, or out would come a license. It was a process that was singular. And I think what's changed is that we're, as providers, we're now providing toolkits. We're providing potential, we're providing capability. And that means that the projects, in order to work, they need to be collaborative. And I think that the authorities that we're selling to sometimes don't really understand what they want to do with the thing that they're seeking to procure. And I think the biggest mistake in procurement processes in public sector at the moment is very arm's length, very sterile procurements that run on the portal, where an aspiration is stated rather than a clear set of objectives and outcomes. And I think there's a responsibility on the buyer's part and on us as providers to just have clarity. And the clarity comes through communications. And the communication comes in terms of specifically agreeing what you're setting out to do, having a plan which is reflected in the contract to deliver outcomes, and real clarity both within the contract and within the project working mechanism of who is going to do what. Because it's no longer a question of the suppliers providing a system and turning it on. It's now about working together to provide engagement solutions, customer focused solutions that are appropriate for the demographics of the authority. So I'd ask the buying authority to know what they want, articulate it, be shaped by the experience of the providers, and then work together collaboratively with a well-defined division of labour as to who's going to do what to make the project a success. But most importantly, keep talking to each other.
And that you make some really interesting points there, Ian, as like more and more as well, is that before you were very much asking for a specific system that would do a specific thing, whereas now what people are buying is totally different. Mags, I can see you smiling away there. I wanted to know if you wanted to come in. Obviously what your organisation provides is a bit different as to...
Yeah, I think where we would start was that it's not a tech project. It's never a technology project. I think, as Ian said, there's an objective there, but I think particularly in the local authority space, it's got to be all about what's the citizen objective. So you've got your citizens, you've got your employees, and you've got your organisation. So there'll be objectives across the three. But for us, I think the key reason that things fail is the lack of stakeholders that really understand what it is you're trying to achieve. So if you were to say we're getting a new CRM, or in Broxbourne, for example, we helped them to glue some stuff together using a Jadu platform that they already had. The technology was actually the least important thing. Sorry, Ian, but it was about what's the citizen journey. We're trying to solve homelessness. We're trying to get people's bins set up. And I think if you it's about JFK, isn't it? You said to the janitor, what's your job? I'm trying to put a man on the moon. I think everybody and all the stakeholders need to understand what it is you're trying to achieve. And if everyone understands the significance of it, I think that then helps the technology project be successful, because it's just, you've got real clarity about where you're heading. So that user research, or by users, it could be citizens, or it could be council employees, a social worker at the front line.
I mean, I think that can be challenging though, but getting buy-in to a certain extent, where people go for a technology project like a CRM and you ask for buy-in for a system, that can be quite different to when you're trying to sell that vision and when you're trying to tell the story. And I quite often say that to organisations, like, what is the story that you're trying to tell?
Yeah.
When you actually get that buy-in. And it was quite interesting. I felt that Andy really talked quite a bit about that, around the story and about the engagement across all aspects of the organisation. And it's been, I found it really inspiring when Andy talked around what he's managed to do in relation to 5, because I think originally it was just about upgraded email, and loads of organisations haven't really gone much further than that. And I know, Robin, you're going to be talking tomorrow morning a bit around the kind of adoption and utilisation piece, but I think that selling the story and the vision, both at corporate level and more widely, is really, really important, and something that's quite often I see lacking. Robin, was there anything that you wanted to pick up on that?
There's 2 comments around that. One is to Ian's point. So I've had experience in the last 12 months, maybe 18 months, where organizations have come out with an idea of what they want, but haven't actually come out with an idea of what the impact of that want is. So rather than going out to tender with an environment that goes, this is what I want, can you give me a price? I have suggested to them that maybe you should come out with some outcome statements, some challenges, tell us how to solve them. So that interaction, as Ian's described, between supplier, buyer kind of scenario becomes far more meshed. It's almost like, if it doesn't make the boat go faster, why are you doing it? You know, and continually challenging that environment. The other comment I'd like to make, and this is to Mag's point, is that if at any point, I think people lose context as we go along a project, right? So while the intentions and the senior level engagement and actually the procurement level engagement is all really defined potentially and structured around governance and process, everybody in that stakeholder environment has a different objective, but you've got to have an overarching context to it all. And that context is lost as you go through design, project management, implementation, adoption. You've got to keep that overarching context. And even if it's a 10, 15-minute communication method saying, guys, don't forget, this is what we're trying to achieve here. You know, let's not lose sight of what our end goal is, because when you talk about value for money, when you talk about delivering against objectives, a digital strategy, you need all of those things when you come to doing your analysis of what happens at the end. And because everybody, you know, the nature of people are they move, but because you have that scenario where the context gets blurred around the edges, you've got to continually get clarity as you go through the piece. If it doesn't make the boat go faster, don't do it, frankly.
I actually think that's a great statement, and I've taken away note of that. I might use that myself.
There's actually
at some point
a book, isn't there? There's a book about making the boat go faster, which is really good.
Yeah.
I mean, Simon, there's probably quite a lot I think that you could come in on, because I think that when you're selling the whole low code thing, I mean, Ian had touched on what you are, is you're selling the potential. You're not buying the finished product. You're basically buying the tools that help you to deliver those business objectives. And some, I know that we've talked a lot in the past. I've talked with some of your Netcall colleagues around how you actually paint that picture and how you sell the whole idea of low code to the organisation. And I just wondered if you wanted to pick up around some of the comments that have been made around the difficulties in getting stakeholders on board and some of the mistakes around communication and not focusing on that citizen objective.
On the citizen objective, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, whatever technical solution you go with, it's just the enabler. It's not what the project is. And I think when you come to projects like that, I think there are a couple of things which lead them to delay or failing. One is not fully understanding, as Ian was saying, not fully understanding what they want at the start. And I think if they come in looking at too narrow, then they're setting themselves up to fail almost. They need to look across the whole organisation and look at what they're actually all trying to achieve. And I think the second thing for our customers then is where they failed is where they don't engage with their end users all the way through the project. It's all right engaging with them at the start, but actually it's a continual and iterative approach that has to be taken, and you've got to engage with them all the way through. And I think if you do that, all of these kind of unforeseen issues that you might come across or hidden workarounds in their current processes or current solutions come out as you go through, rather than finding them right at the end. You know, whatever they think their process is, when it comes down to really being explored, they will have, over the years, had to find ways of getting around small niggles, sometimes big niggles, but trying to get around those. And if they go looking for a solution that's exactly what they've got now, then again, they're going to fail. You know, and then I think the other big thing that we find is that all too often projects take a a business as usual approach can work alongside a digital transformation project. And actually, I think one of the key things to remember in there is that if it is a transformation project, everything is going to change, or things are going to change. And actually working the way you do now is what you're trying to get away from. And so going, yeah, but that's not how we work, or this is the way we've done it for years. Those kind of old adages that we hear in local authority quite a lot sometimes. It's about getting the people's buy-in to the fact that those things will change. But again, if you take people with you on that journey, then you get less resistance towards the end. In terms of the point that you asked, Esther, about our technology and how we take that approach, so we do just that. We don't go in and go, you're buying a CRM or you're looking to buy a waste management system. What low code gives you as a platform is more of that. It's exactly that. It's a platform, and that's what you're buying into, and that does require that change in approach to projects and thinking more about what's the overall outcome for the organisation.
No, I think you're right, Simon. And looking at some of the advice, the issue about resources come up time and time again, and it was one of the things that I was talking about yesterday, like how often I see organisations who they make the bid for what they need externally, so they make the bid for the finances that they need to bring the supplier in or bring the system in or work with a strategic partner. But then they decide they'll just kind of muddle through internally, or they make it as part of people's day job, and then around either the pace of the delivery or things aren't delivering what they expect it to be, and then people again are looking and blaming the technology. And it's one of the things I think when people are looking at a business case, there seems to be like a natural desire to lowball your internal resource, because people are worried that if you're totally honest about how much something's going to cost, you're not going to get the money. And you can't really lowball the external money, because that's money that's going out the organisation. But actually, you can maybe fudge your internal figures a bit. And probably, like for me, that's where I see projects struggling more often than not, is that either just genuinely misunderstanding how much internal resource you need, or actually thinking, well, we'll not put that in and we'll just muddle through because that team will be able to cope. And I just wondered if that's something, I know that Simon and I have talked a bit around that, need to have adequate resourcing regardless of what the project actually is, and understand the total cost of ownership. So not just of what you're buying in, but actually your internal support requirements. Don't know, Robin, if you want to pick up on some of that.
Yeah. So resource is always a challenge. I think there's two things that needs to happen. Don't ever underestimate the challenge sometimes to be able to deliver on a technology project, not just the end user experience, but actual physical technology. Certainly from our perspective, we are spending a lot of time with customers and changing the mindset about you're the supplier, we're the buyer. And because the only sure thing in life, actually, particularly now, is that change is going to happen. So in order to be able to agile enough to make that work, particularly around resource, is you've got to have some flexibility. There's got to be an understanding between the project teams that flexibility exists. The other part of that is, and it seems like a very obvious one, but it's something that potentially I see occasionally in projects, is that both the supplier and the buyer are both working towards the same goal. There is no supplier I have ever met who wants to make a Horlicks of a delivery. You just don't. It's not part of their makeup. They want to do it. Sometimes things get in the way, but we've got to be proactive in the way that it approaches. So it's very much a strategic partnership approach. It's not just a supplier-buyer relationship. And that, for me, is I'm seeing a shift now towards that. Again, to the end outcome. We're committed to delivering that end outcome. So what do we need to do in order to deliver it? What are the jump off points? How do we test it? How do we make sure we get buy-in? How do we report back? All those elements around the outside are crucial now, more than ever, particularly when we talk about the money going out and the return on investment coming back in.
Esther's disappeared. I was going to say, Simon, you had your hand up, didn't you?
I think Ian had his hand up, yeah.
The reason that I disappeared was because Andy had been messaging me to say that my signal's really poor, so I'd switched my camera off, and it then means that if you mute, I'm still here, I'm just hiding in the background.
Right, okay.
It means that I'm mute, it looks like I'm not on the stage, but I'm still here and I'm listening to everything and taking notes. Ian, I'll bring you in to respond to some of what you've heard.
Yeah, I was keen to jump in there, Esther, and I think one of the things, there is a point here around the stakeholder influence. It's fantastic to get stakeholder buy-in, to have leadership from the top and a clearly stated objective as to what the authority is trying to achieve and a commitment to that achievement from the top down. But it has to remain for the duration of the delivery and beyond. It can't be a one-off. And I've actually worked, clearly I'm not going to name the authority, but I've worked, not while I was at Ferrand, but with a previous employer and with a previous project. I worked at a tier 1 county council, and at the stakeholder kickoff, at the project kickoff, the excitement was palpable. There were 18 stakeholders in the room. There were 22 opinions, because by the time they'd all gone round, several wanted to change their mind. You're smiling because you're used to that. But we then went on to deliver the project, and the project had a part-time manager and 2 people. So when the project was beginning to understandably not do as well as they had expected, I couldn't find any of the 18 stakeholders to explain that maybe if there were 3 committed stakeholders and 18 people delivering the project, then perhaps we might be making more progress. And I think there has to be that reality. And I think, again, the whole delivery model has changed. It's gone from being spectators watching people going around playing a game of golf to actually being part of the team, albeit a 5-a-side football match or a 15-a-side rugby match. There are different skills and abilities that need to be on the field. And some of those come from the supplier and some of those come from the person receiving, the buyer, and from the authority. And I think the other point I was going to make, that in terms of the aspirations, local authorities can learn well from, and they're always talking to their partner organisations and to other local authorities. Everybody's on a different stage of their digital journey, even if they're using the same technologies. We have over 50 customers. As Ferrand, we have over 50 local authorities using our technology, but clearly some are much more advanced in the adoption of that, and some have utilised it to a far greater extent of others. And we encourage that sharing within the community. If you're at a certain stage on your digital journey, you won't get exemplars from within your organisation other than the ones that are leading it. But you can get ideas and thoughts and exemplars from other authorities and share adaptations of the technologies and put them to good use in your own authority. It's learn, adapt, deploy, and go forward.
There's a couple of questions in the chat that I think would be good to bring in. So, as what the panel are saying is that the local government approach to procurement and projects is now out of date. Simon, I don't know if you want to pick up on that.
I just think it's changed. I think it's evolved more than anything else. I think we've seen a shift in the way in which we engage with our customers in recent years. And I think one of the biggest ways that that's changed is around the way in which, as a supplier, we're now in a position to think about how customers are building their business cases and support them with that a little bit more, because I think as we already said, they're having to change the way they think. This grand plan about a waterfall type of approach of a project where you know everything up front and look for the long, the implementation right at the end doesn't work anymore. And that means you have to shift the way in which you think as an authority, the way in which you're looking to procure, really, in terms of the solutions that you're looking for, rather than the way in which you procure. I don't necessarily think there's a problem with the way in which procurements are done within local authorities. I just think it's an approach before it gets to that point of procurement. It's starting with and ending with the end users almost, and going, they're the most important in this. What are you delivering to them? whether those be internal end users within your organisation or whether they be members of the public, obviously depending upon the project and the solution that you're looking for. But I think it's just about a shift in an approach and a thought process. And I think the key thing to that is then remembering that digital transformation is continual. You don't do one thing and then that's it, you've sorted the problems and that's digital transformation done. It is a continual thing, I think.
So Robin, I'll bring you in a minute, but see just what you're saying about the continual thing. See the number of organisations that have discussions with who their team is temporary. So they hire the temporary team. There's a whole effort around filling out the paperwork every year to make the team, to extend the budget for the team for another year. And I'm like, you're not going to get to the end of the journey. There's not going to be a bit where we're going to say, right, that's digital done. We don't need that team anymore. Of course, we'll need a core team, and then that team needs to be supplemented for different projects. But again, it probably goes back to that issue around being honest about the resource up front. Robin, I saw you had your hand up there, so I'll bring you in.
I was going to say I agree with Simon wholeheartedly in everything that he's just said, but I'm going to be slightly controversial here and suggest that it is not the project management or the capability of a local authority to deliver projects. It's procurement that needs to change. And I don't mean the way they procure, I mean the way they are part of a stakeholder engagement. There's a feeling, certainly in my experience, certainly the last 2 years, is when you come onto, you go through a process and then you suddenly see procurement are joining a call and you just dread. Because they're not part of the outcome statement, they're part of the governance and process and procedures, which quite rightly they should be. But they're a stakeholder in this game, but they're a stakeholder in this process as well. And they have to get, in my view, change their attitude slightly towards if it don't make the boat go faster.
Max, do you want to come in a bit around some of the comments that Simon was making around focusing on the end user in relation to the project?
Absolutely. I think that the end user, you've got to focus on them all the way through. You've got to, so you find out through your user research what it is that they want. Then you've got to map that to what the service journey is. And it can't be the perfect service journey because you might not be able to do it. You might not be affordable, but you've got to do that. And you've got to constantly touch base with those users as you go through that project, not just at the beginning. I completely agree with you. And that's not just at the start. It's you create that journey and then you go and you test it as you go through, and it'll never come to an end. So once you've launched it, you then have to go back and you increment it and you change it. And then policy will change. So I think in central government in Scotland, one of the things that's worked really well is they created a panel for social security of users that they just kept going back to all the time, a really representative panel. And I can't help but feel, we've done loads of user research in Broxbourne, and of course every demographic is different, yeah. But there must just be that way within local government that we can share what we've learned. So just on the table earlier, I was having a good chat with Michelle Coyle about a housing project, just saying we did some great work around homelessness. Wouldn't it, just that sharing across local government, I think there's a great opportunity to almost inherit what somebody else has done in their user research and then validate to see how that's different. But I think there's a great opportunity just to layer all this user research up in local government because you're so close to each other.
And that's what happens in the healthcare sector. They do share experiences across the board. So there is use cases out there about where the benefits lie. Definitely.
Ian, one of the things that you had said earlier that you thought that procurement had really changed, that people were buying the potential as opposed to actually buying the solution. Has your organisation made any changes to adapt to that, which has helped improve the engagement with customers and ultimately what the outcomes of the projects are?
So we've got tools that we share with customers, hopefully before procurement, to help them actually define what is a realistic budget to achieve the outcomes that they desire. It's very difficult for suppliers when there are very kind of elaborate statements of what the authority wants to achieve, but no idea as to what their spending power is. And we want, all of us, I think, as suppliers, want people to buy on a value proposition rather than a price proposition. If you buy cheap, you get cheap. And I quite often ask when we're conversational, behave differently with their own money than they do with the public purse. And in their own homes, have they bought the cheapest television that was available in the store? No, they haven't. They've bought more expensive, will give them a better quality, better experience, and last for longer. But when they come to work, there can quite often be a short-term procurement which buys the cheapest, and then in 18 months' time, it's effectively disposable because it was envisaged that it would last for 5 years, but actually it's run out of steam after 18 months. People do behave differently with their own money as with the public purse when they come to work. Now, to help achieve a realistic return on investment, at Verint we've designed basically engagement management tools that look at how the engagement model will change, how people will use digital channels, which are cheaper rather than more expensive channels. And we use those return on investment models to envisage a current and a post-delivery scenario. And we also work to give a total cost of ownership model. So we look at things, including the cost of internal resourcing, to make the project achieve the results that were set out in the first place. So we have a total cost of ownership modeled over 2 or 3 years as appropriate, and we have a return on investment model that models the adoption of those digital channels. And the last thing I would say on that is be realistic about where the returns come. A customer of ours from Southampton City Council was speaking the other day and said for 30% of their customers, they have no engagement whatsoever in any channel. The council tax gets paid, that's it. They never hear from that 30%. It's 30% who do have a high dependency that they're looking at what they're asking for. And some sort of high transactional things that local authorities do lend themselves very well to digitalisation. Some more complex case management need to be managed more with a personal touch, and some things don't need to be digitised at all. I, for one, would not want a virtual lifeguard, for example. So it's looking realistically at where you can make most return on the investment of transforming your digital commitment to customers.
I mean, some of what you've talked around there, Ian, is almost around that kind of co-design, and it's really engaging with the supplier before you get into that more formal tender process where that kind of to and fro is a wee bit more difficult. And I know that back when I worked at North Ayrshire, like I really liked the Vodafone model, that it was a kind of business partnering model. And I remember us having the discussion about like come to us with a problem rather than a solution, because by the time you came up with, and I think it's difficult because technology is moving so fast, it's really difficult for everybody to keep up. And I think that from an organisation point of view, people need to be a bit less scared of suppliers and actually be working with suppliers a bit more around the designing of what that potential solution will be, rather than, well, we need to sit in a room and design it all by ourselves and then we'll come and tell you when we know what we actually want. And I don't know if you wanted to pick up on that, Robin, just around some of the kind of business partnering work that you get.
Yeah, so our approach is a very simple one. It's a consultative one, but more importantly, it's around the art of what is potentially possible, right? So you make a good point, Esther, about being able to have a problem and then we'll find a solution to that problem using technology. But don't underestimate, I think, the complexity, the potential complexity of actually defining what that problem is. Because you've got a number of stakeholders going around the organization, all who potentially have a stake in the delivery mechanism or the outcome statement. And understanding what that looks like is sometimes a long process. For us, we know that we have experience in a number of areas, but every customer is different. And we would rather, to Ian's point, and I think Simon and Max would agree as well, we'd rather engage early to either suggest this is one way, it may not be the only way, but it's one way of solving that problem, or just say, look, we can't solve that problem. We're not in this, and we can't provide you with what you're looking for. I'd rather do that than simply look at a blank piece of paper, do a return of information. Say, here's our portfolio, which goes from A to B, it's, down to Z. And I think ultimately, I go back to my point, is that organizations like Vodafone in particular, and I'm not just Vodafone, we're not unique in this space, I don't think. are more interested in solving problems than providing technology. That's why we exist. It's really difficult to articulate that if you're looking at a blank piece of paper saying type 1,000 words and what you can do.
So I'm actually going to bring Mags in here again, because one of the questions on the chat is around what you see as the role of the digital manager or the digital worker within government. And I know that's something that Andy McDonald talked about earlier on when he was talking about the importance of his digital champions and then his change agents. And I know you've talked a wee bit around the involvement of the customer, but a wee bit around how you see the role of the digital manager developing.
Yeah, and the digital manager is why, that Broxbourne spoke yesterday. I would say that their staff were the ones that really worked with us to make it go at pace. So in Agile speak, the role of a digital manager is more that kind of product manager role. So the digital manager is somebody who is empowered by the business, really understands what's going on to make decisions, to keep pushing things forward. And they've got to be a bit of a project manager. They've got to know the business, and they've also got to just have that passion for moving things forward. So there are different disciplines that are emerging now. When we can see that a good project manager can absolutely become a good digital manager, but they have to have the right attitude. If they're really stuck on tasks and the A has to follow B, has to follow C, they're probably going to struggle with that. And we've been retraining a lot of our customers as well as our own staff, and it's quite a challenge. But I think they've got to be good at telling a story. A digital manager's got to be a really good storyteller. And I can't remember who it was. Was it Simon that talked about context? They've just got to be a really good change agent that can bring people on board and just drive it forward. And the technology will follow through. The technology is the easy bit, not that it's not trivial and it's not uncomplex, but it's the easy bit if you can get people moving forward and get the momentum going. But it is a different skill set, and I think you have to invest in people to get there. It's not just I'm going to make you a digital manager. You're going to have to invest in people to become a digital manager.
And I think some people will, and other people will struggle with that. And I think it was really interesting yesterday seeing what Broxbourne have been able to do. But similarly, most of the case study that been able to do stuff successfully, whether that was Edinburgh or Aberdeen today, I've all talked about the power of the people, both getting buy-in at executive level, but also making sure that you've got that buy-in on the ground. Because I think with all of these digital projects, we're away from everybody goes into a classroom, they learn what it is, they go back, they implement it. I mean, everything, all the technology that we see now is moving to the more sort of evergreen. We see things like Microsoft Office 365, where functionality is being pushed out all the time. So it's just no feasible now that people go away into a classroom and that's how they learn. There'll still be, of course, there's still that requirement for certain products, but so much of the stuff that we'll see in organisations is people being self-taught, learning from peers, learning through like sort of YouTube videos and self-help. And I think that sort of follows on from a lot of the examples that we've seen. Just moving on to a bit around the supplier-customer relationship, and we've got a question in the chat around positive relationships between suppliers and customers. How do we rebuild that? And it's saying, how do we rebuild the trust that was lost with legacy suppliers? So that's probably quite an interesting viewpoint. I think it's an anonymous question, so I don't know if anybody's willing to put their hat in the ring around the trust being lost, maybe in previous days where the trust has been lost, and what we do to actually get that back.
I'm happy to pick that up. I think that it spins off the back of something that Robin was saying earlier about getting involved earlier with our customers on any new projects. I think if you can do that, I think if you can show them willingness and commitment to helping them understand the problem that they're really trying to solve, and not thinking about it from a technology perspective, I think if you can do that and get in there and help them to question almost what it is that they're looking for and to rethink things a little bit, and to really try and delve into what they're trying to achieve and help them to understand what their processes really are. I think that's a good way of rebuilding that relationship and then taking that forward and going, right, okay, so now that we've done that, let's look at how we can help you get the right solution to do that. In our case, it's going to be looking at our technology. In Robin's case, he's going to be looking at their technology. In Ian's, it's the same. I appreciate it's a little bit different for you, Mags, with the roles that you play in local authorities. But it is going to be about then trying to find the best solution. I think Robin said it earlier. We're all in this to try and help solve problems and provide them with the best solution for the services that they deliver.
Just add there, Esther, if you don't mind. Look,
no, on you go.
People make decisions based on the information they have at that time. So if you really want to repair a relationship or look at a positive relationship between a supplier and a customer, as a supplier, which I don't like the word, but as a partner, it's incumbent to us to provide the right information at the right times to make the right decisions. That's where the trust lies. And if that means challenging actually what the outcome statement looks like and saying, are you sure, what benefit is this going to provide? Be a challenger supplier or a partner, as opposed to, yeah, okay, I'll price that up for you. That to me, it builds that trust, not just as a special advisor kind of style trust, but gives the organization the right information at the right time to make the right decision.
I'm just wanting to see if there's anybody that's in the room. I'll come to you in a second, Ian. If anybody wants to ask a question, like in person, if you put your hand up and we can invite you up onto the stage. I know that some people hate that, so if you want to continue just to ask questions in the chat, that's absolutely fine as well. Ian, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think to answer, because I think there's a kind of a dark cloud behind this lost trust between the community. I mean, I think, Robin, we are suppliers, and we have to be honest about that. Our job is to supply tools and services. We crave partnerships. I think one of the things that's gone wrong around the level of trust is that I think some people who are not experienced at buying think that suppliers like ourselves are desperate for business. And I think we have a duty to ourselves. We have a duty to ourselves and a duty of care to customers to say, well, no, sorry, we're not desperate for business, right? We're desperate for good business, and we're desperate for the opportunity to create those partnerships. But it becomes a two-way process. We want to end up with partners. Edinburgh, who spoke yesterday, are definitely a partner of ours, because they spoke yesterday about how much they were able to do themselves, that they felt empowered, they felt they owned the solution, and they could come to us as their trusted supplier to just provide the help that they needed when they needed it. And I think, we're all in agreement that that's what we're looking for. But we have to say, yes, we are suppliers to the marketplace, because that gives us a duty of care to that marketplace to be continuously investing in making our solutions better and giving more potential from the tools that we provide. So I think we love to be partners. We embrace those partnerships, but we can't say that we're partners to everybody, because if people don't want to behave in the way that generates that partnership, we remain as suppliers. And I think I've seen that relationship change. I've seen us being treated with suspicion and an element of distrust, and it's those nasty suppliers. Well, I don't think we are nasty, and I think that some of the people who might say all nasty suppliers, they have a job and they want to do their job, and it requires on them utilising the things that are sold in the marketplace. So I wear the badge of a supplier with pride, but I want to be a credible supplier and an honest and open supplier. And it's all around this communication. It comes back to, if you communicate well with suppliers, they'll communicate back to you, and if they don't, then you shouldn't choose them as your preferred partner.
So one of the questions in the chat, has anybody got any advice on how can your customers be better customers? What can the local authorities do to build positive relationships with the partners?
I think I just started to answer that, but I'm sure that people on the panel will want to elaborate.
Mags, do you want to pick up that?
Yeah, it's all about trust, isn't it? I think at the start of any program of work, no matter whether it's a tiny little discovery or a full-blown implementation of something, you've got to get the team together, and you've got to work as a combined team. And I think in terms of being, the councils have to understand that their staff that they're putting on it they have to support their staff as best as they possibly can. So if there's bad news to be told, they need to be empowered, if you like, to go and deliver that news. Well, we haven't met our dependencies or whatever. But I think there's a level thing there. And if you are an SRO, you have to be a proper SRO and you have to support the team of people that are there. You know, and I think that's often governance. I think Robin mentioned governance earlier. Governance for me is a really positive thing. Governance should be about how can we help projects to succeed. Not, I think what often happens is picking up, 99 things goes well and focus on the one thing that hasn't gone well. There has to be a real balance there around proper, pragmatic, necessary and sufficient is what our QA guy talks about in terms of necessary and sufficient governance. But make governance positive to help people to proceed, as opposed to it being a policing thing. I think that.
I do think that's something that organisations struggle with, Mags. I can see what you're saying around using the governance to focusing on the right things, minimise the risk to the organisation, and move things forward at pace. But more often than not, I just see governance slowing things down and people being bogged down. I think it's about getting the right level of detail to the right stakeholders.
Yes.
And quite often what I ask is really detailed stuff going up to a really senior level. And actually that slows things down, because then they're involved in reading like reams and reams and reams of paperwork, and projects then can't move forward sufficiently. So it's about who needs to know what information and how you present that in the right format.
And that's back to the storytelling, Esther. That's back to the right storytelling. So the chief exec or the council leader or whatever are going to want to know at one level, and then you're going to have the different levels. So I think if you play the levels right, then it can work really well. But you got to start it off well. You got to start off on the premise of trust and transparency, and then just keep going.
So I'm probably just going to change tack slightly, and I have to say that this is an area that's quite close to my heart, and I don't see a lot of organisations doing it particularly well. But I really want to talk about benefits realisation and see if you've got any advice. So what I would normally see is people estimating benefits up front. Some more realistic than others. Some spend ages gathering baseline information. Some do very, very little. And then once the business case has been done, it's almost like the benefits realisation bit gets packed away, and then it doesn't get revisited until much further down the line, if at all. Or somebody will say, well, what's happening with the benefits? Or I've been in the position where the money gets taken out your budget and you haven't delivered the benefits because things have changed or the timescales for the project has changed. And probably, like, even when I've been asking for benchmarking information on benefits, I found it really difficult to find organisations that are doing benefits realisation particularly well. You get people that will talk about the benefits, but when you say, have you actually delivered, like, can you talk about what you've delivered either in money or in hours? It can be quite difficult to get those real tangible benefits, as opposed to maybe the kind of softer story about how we've made it better for the citizen or how we've made it better for the member of staff. Does anybody want to pick up around advice that you might offer in that area to organisations in relation to benefits realisation?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a stab at that one. I think traditionally, you're right. I think, in terms of business cases, the business case tend to be written based on the long-term goal of the project and the benefits that you get once the project is finished. And I think that society has changed, and the way of working and running projects has changed. And I think that I think most of us here would agree that, if not all of us, that the way to run a project now is in an agile approach. Yeah. And an iterative approach. And I think if you do buy into that way of working, then the realization of benefits happens more regularly. Mm-hmm. We've got examples of a customer realizing benefits every 12 weeks or so. And they've implemented in 1 year 16 different projects. Their cashable savings or their efficiency savings stack up continually over that 12-month period and beyond. And that's because they did take a different approach. And I think if you do work in that way, as I say, you set yourselves a target, which is your overall project, and that's great. But as society changes, as we found this year, mm-hmm. particularly, things come out completely out of left field that you're not expecting, that throw everything out of kilter. And you know what? The same happens within projects. Whatever you think is going to be your end game, there will be things that come along during that period that will disrupt that project to some degree. But that doesn't mean you can't see realizable benefits throughout that project's lifetime. You know, it's about breaking it down into small, measurable chunks, and that does require that agile and iterative approach, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see loads of organisations that are keen to embrace agile, but they find it difficult to let go of but probably back to governance actually, is around the kind of governance and more traditional project structure, because I think that idea where you're scoping out your agile sprints and thinking around the value and the effort, and then very quickly saying, well, what have we learned from that sprint and have we delivered it? I think the organisations in principle are keen to deliver on that, but I'm not sure that there's a number of organisations are necessarily set up in that way just yet, even although that's where their ambition might be. Mags, did you want to pick up on any of that?
Yeah, I think that the governance, and this is back to the kind of procurement thing, and I think that we see some procurement people who have really evolved to have more of a commercial role as well. So it's not just letting the contract, but actually having an involvement as they go through. So it's not truly agile because there will be a budget, and there probably is a time scale that it has to be delivered. True agile is just that, you know, your time scale is fixed, and the if you like, the money and the functionality varies. It's not true agile. We're using agile principles, but it's not true agile. So I think you have to have both. It's a hybrid approach. So there has to be a budget, there has to be key outcomes that you've got to achieve, and you've got to measure it as you go. And it's that prioritization thing that people really find tough. But in good customers that we've been working with, procurement having more of a commercial role is really helpful, because they're not down in the weeds, as you were saying earlier, Esther, in that governance thing. They're not down in the weeds, but they're just managing the budget. And we've been doing a lot of statements of work. So that iteration that Simon's talking about, we're able to pin it down quite well for, say, 3 or 4 months. And then we can stop, and then we regroup, and then we can do another one. And that works quite well, but it's just really hard, because procurement will say there is a fixed budget, and if there is a fixed budget, it's not agile. You can do it in phases, but it's not agile, not truly. And I think that's the misnomer. You can't have an agile project if your budget is fixed.
That's really interesting, Mags. Ian, did you want to come in with anything?
Yeah,
there?
I think that's a really interesting point that Mags makes, and I think I, as someone who came out of local government myself, I am always really empathetic and sympathetic to the fact that it seems to be the case that central government gets so much more investment. Central government gets the luxury of those flexible budgets, and there's a do it and learn. I mean, whoever heard in a local government environment of doing an alpha and then throwing that project away and commencing on the beta? You know, I've heard that notion once from a city council, and I just went, you haven't got the money to do that. You don't. You have to know where you're going with the first adoption. And central government seems to be able to be quite indulgent in their kind of exploration of the potential of the technologies. Local government has always, and it's been exacerbated enormously, even pre-COVID, we know it was being exacerbated. The pressure, the pincer movement is on to maintain or improve services whilst reducing the cost. And the technologies that we're talking about can reduce the cost of FTEs. We are talking about digitising and automating delivery of services where there's less FTE involvement. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to abandon those FTEs. You can redirect those resources. You have, if you like, a reinvestment, a continuous improvement of staff. And I think what COVID has shown us is that there's a difference between the front office, which is where we've spoken about savings can be made in the middle office and we actually deliver services in the front office. There's now the concept very clearly proven of the front line as well as the front office. And we've been helping authorities move staff out of the middle office, literally pushing bits of paper around or duplicating effort into the front office. And now I think we've been able, where projects are successful and the technologies have been properly adopted, to move staff from the front office to the front line. And I think local government has come out of the current crisis in glowing colours. I think they've proven to themselves the ability to adapt, to learn quickly, and to change very quickly in a way that perhaps we had been frustrated by prior to COVID, at the lack of the ability to change and modify. And all of a sudden, this crisis has forced that, and local government and in the UK has done extraordinarily well compared to central government's response, I would proclaim.
All right, so thanks for that, Ian. So just before I sum up, because I'm conscious that we're running out of time, Simon, somebody's asked if you can share who the council or who the customer was that was delivering the project in that way, because I think probably people think that it'd be quite good if that was a case study or something else, that's something that we could all learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was Cumbria County Council.
Cumbria, right.
And we have case studies of Cumbria County Council on our website.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for that, Simon. So, thank you so much for all your advice and conversation. I knew it would be quite a lively panel, which it has been, and I think there's loads of advice there. I've been jotting down some notes so that I can do some top tips from the suppliers that we can share across social media. But I know that there's a lot of themes around the resourcing, around working in partnership, being clear about your objectives, and making sure that that engagement is not just at the start of the project, but actually continues all the way through, and really harnessing the opportunities to collaborate and share both with the partner organisations or the suppliers, but also looking across other local government and within the public sector. So all that's really left is to say thanks very much to all our members on the panel, and I know that we'll hear from sort of Robin again later on in the week. So thanks for your participation.
Thanks very much. My
Thank you.
pleasure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, have a good day.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Oh, so we're now actually just due to have a short break, and so we can be back for 12 o'clock.